Let me tell you why Ori and the Will of the Wisps is already a Game of the Year contender, and why you must play it. Let me tell you how adding a more expansive combat and traversal system gives Ori 2 versatility to let you play how you want to play. Let me tell you how Moon iterated on a game that was damn near perfect and created a game that is better in almost every way and still damn near perfect. I mean, just look at this. Maybe you are thinking about buying Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or maybe you just want a super lightweight look at whether it's worth purchasing. Well, this is where you should be. Here's how I structure my reviews. We cover these things super quickly to help you learn whether this is the game for you. Let's go. Genre competitor comparison. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a 2D metroidvania platformer by Moon Studios. It involves traversing around this absolutely gorgeous world by using a range of different movement abilities, fighting enemies with the newly added weapons, and solving puzzles involving traversal, combat, timing, and lateral thinking. If you are a fan of games like Metroid, Castlevania, Hollow Knight, Shovel Knight, or other more active puzzle platformers, you are going to be blown away by this game. Ori and the Will of the Wisps also innovates considerably on the previous game, Ori and the Blind Forest, in almost every aspect, so if you played the last game, then this will feel familiar to begin with, before quickly adding fresh new mechanics to expand on what Ori 1 laid down. For the core game loop. The story in the Ori games is simple and heartfelt and beautiful, but it would not surprise me if it was tweaked to be engaging enough to serve as motivation for the player, and then get the hell out of the way to let the game mechanics show you just how amazing they truly are, and how this world doesn't just look amazing, but is designed brilliantly. After a wonderful animated intro, Ori is lost and needs to find her friend Ku, who was lost elsewhere in a new forest, distant from the Nibel from the previous game. Later on, Ori needs to collect 4 wisps, which have been scattered throughout this new forest. 3 of these wisps can be collected in any order, making the game a little bit less linear, and these motivations lead the player to the different areas of the map. Each area has its own theme, and the hazards and obstacles of each area are almost always derived from that theme. The player will do a range of tasks to become familiar with the area's mechanics and make their way to the Spirit Tree. Here they are bestowed a new ability that will open up the area to further exploration, and they will fight their way to the end. Most areas finish in a climactic traversal or combat sequence. The minute-to-minute gameplay is either solving small puzzles to figure out how to progress, or fighting enemies between traversal or puzzle sections. Key standout features. So we get the gist of the game. What are some of the features that stand out and make this experience unique? Quality. As an overarching statement, the quality of Ori and the Will of the Wisps is evident and abundant, with the exception of one issue that we will talk about later in the points of issue. Just look at this, and this intro cinematic, these particle effects and animations, the backgrounds. The quality is in the art, astounding in its depth and complexity, in the play space, in the midground, in the foreground, and the background. The layers of the environment that all rustle in the wind, only to fall away next minute to be replaced by a grand vista before diving back into the forest. In the variety of different areas, and in the technical aspects like the particles, lighting, and animations. Quality is in the level designs, introducing and expanding on concepts before changing things up with abilities, but also leaving plenty of challenges and secrets to satiate more hardcore gamers. It's in the audio, where attacks feel crunchy, abilities feel weighty, and music swells and dips and swells again in concert with all of the above. It's in the enemy design, where many creatures behave in complex multi-state ways, and how these enemies all look and sound and react. The amazing boss design of multiple stages and arenas. You feel this game more than you play it, and that is down to the quality of everything in it working together. Gush. Okay, let's talk about something else. Abilities. You will get lots of abilities in Ori and the Will of the Wisps. There's the staples of the genre, the jump, double jump, and dash, but these quickly give way to new abilities which are exciting and different. Seriously, it gets a little bit crazy. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a metroidvania, where most of the skills that unlock new paths are traversal abilities. These allow access to new areas, but also feed back into previous areas, where you can return to find secrets. All the abilities behave in a unique way, and feel great with tight animations and visceral audio. They are just plain fun to use. What is great about these abilities is the way they are strung together in both small puzzles and in long sequences at the climax of areas. They test precision, timing, quick thinking, and decision making, both without and under pressure. Gameplay sequences, therefore, are stimulating and rarely dull, as there is always another thing to figure out and overcome. And gameplay sequences are rewarding because you are constantly overcoming obstacles using skill and intelligence. Even just basic traversal lays the way to little puzzles constantly that require you to use different abilities. Where the abilities really shine though, is in the flexibility of the moveset. To illustrate this, there is a triple jump in the game that is a purchasable upgrade. But, as far as I can tell, it's completely optional. You can complete the game without it, just by using your abilities in smart ways. I don't want to spoil the abilities you will collect, but believe me, there's a lot of flexibility in this moveset, and the design asks you to quickly switch between abilities at a split second's notice on the regular. And hypothetically, can you imagine if someone took a combat system and bolted that onto all of this crazy flexibility in Traversal? I mean, what kind of mad scientist would do something like that? Combat. In Ori and the Blind Forest, there was combat, but pressing the attack button would auto-attack things around you, and the focus was very concerned with put Ori in the right place at the right time, and as long as you press the button, the damage will hit. At the start of the game, I got to this spirit tree, and got the Blade of Light ability, and I was like, Todd Howard's leather jacket. They put a damn combat system in this game, and did Moon ever put a combat system in this game? There are two abilities that are free to use that do combat damage, which are the Blade of Light and this smashy hammer, so heavy and light attacks. Everything else uses energy, these little blue orbs, and unlike Ori Blind Forest, these orbs now function like a bar, and they can be depleted down part way. There are a bunch of energy combat abilities, all doing different things, and useful in different situations. When you combine this with the traversal mechanics, you get one of the most complex and flexible combat systems I have seen in a platformer. I'll cut together some footage and put it here, because you'll get more out of seeing it than me talking about it, but you can play through this game with just the sword and the hammer. But you can also approach different situations in all kind of different ways. Something up high might use a ranged ability. Lots of things around you use blaze for area damage. Shield, smash it with a hammer. Once you upgrade or unlock some of your traversal abilities, you start gaining a level of mobility and damage that makes you feel the power trip. Things that were once threatening and dangerous, you can now dance around majestically and eliminate with ease. You can't rest on your laurels though. The enemies will take hits, but they don't stun for long, so if you aren't careful, they will quickly even the score. This makes each one feel dangerous, and prevents the player from just mashing attack. You need to dance the dance of each enemy. I would be unhappy not to mention the bosses too, but I really don't want to spoil them for you, so just know that all that we've spoken about so far is only amplified in the boss battles. One last thing. I could honestly talk about why this game is great for hours, but having covered the traversal system and the combat system, I feel like I have talked enough about the core of what the game is to be able to be the most informative for you to make a purchase. But there are some other things that I do want to mention, and then we'll get into some of the points of issue. Just also be aware that there is a range of systems, added or improved, that support these core mechanics, like the shard system, that adds an element of build diversity to the game by allowing a player to add different abilities and modifiers into these slots, like Sticky, that will prevent Ori sliding down walls for easier traversal, or the ability to let you bash enemies as well as projectiles for easier combat. Wellspring Glades, which is this village area that the player can spend resources in to build into a paradise, which adds a nice external progression system, and the change of making spirit orbs behave like money rather than experience, which lets the player buy upgrades and choose where their effort is spent. Major points of issue. Right, why might you not like it? There has to be something wrong with this game, right? There is only one big issue with this game, and the rest of what I'm going to talk about is going to be nitpicking, because honestly, outside of this issue, the game is pretty damn near perfect. Performance. So there are definitely some performance issues with this game. They don't affect the game too much, but when they hit hard. The thing that I bumped into the most was these freezes. They happen when moving between areas, and so I can only assume they are streaming bottlenecks when trying to bring assets in. You will bump into them often if you are moving quickly through the areas, but also sometimes when you're just playing the game normally. They don't affect gameplay too much, and from what I can tell, they don't accept input during the freeze, so you can just wait until it passes. But they last for several seconds at a time, most of the time, which can be really jarring and sometimes affect platforming. I think for a similar reason, often when you jump into the menu, the game will chug hard. It's loading something, but I hate this. I like map screens to be snappy because I use them a lot, and this one is not snappy. The game also crashed 3 or 4 times throughout my playthrough. Game freezes, then the Xbox would force quit the application and you end up back on the OS dashboard. I was also caught in or below the colliders a few times, but this is, I think, due to using fast moving abilities in specific unfortunate places. Pain in the butt though, but I imagine these bugs are pretty hard to smash out. Now, I'm playing on an Xbox One S, that's the weaker, slim, white Xbox One. I have heard problems being worse on the Xbox One X, which is the more powerful one, and other problems pop up on that system like texturing issues. I haven't looked into PC performance, but this is definitely something to be aware of if this kind of thing annoys you. Nitpicking. Right, here's some small things to consider because I don't just want to say all good things. Due to the flexibility that we discussed a few minutes ago, naturally there are some edge cases where things can get a bit wonky. I played through on normal difficulty, and I'm a pretty conservative player in general, so most combat that I did was just with the blade and the hammer. It would have been way easier to use some of the energy abilities in combat too, but when I started to do this a bit, because I had been collecting all of the energy upgrades, I felt very OP. It's not a problem as such, but you can make some combat trivial by being so over upgraded it doesn't feel as satisfying to complete. You can just hail arrows or spears at enemies and they just waste away. Worth being aware of. The triple jump does something very similar to Traversal and makes certain parts very easy if you take this ability early. Again, worth knowing, not a problem per se. If you fall in the spikes that are littered throughout every area, there are some places where you can get stuck under the geometry. Just get good, I guess. Getting on top of one of these still feels like trash, in a rare case where I hate the platforming and the game feel of something in Ori. Luckily, this action is much less common in Wisps, but I do wish you could press a button to climb up. The particle effects are gorgeous, but they can be a lot sometimes. It took me a while to get used to what direction I was facing with the sword, because the particle effect is quite intense. But I did get used to it after a while, and then it never bothered me again. I hope you are appreciating how low level I need to go to find an issue with this game. Seriously, when you fall into pits, it's a little difficult to get back out again. This isn't exactly a game-breaking bug. So let's move on. Personal opinion. Look, I don't think it's very difficult to tell that I think this is an amazing game. And unless you really, really, really don't like platformers, I would say it's a must-play. It's honestly one of the tightest designed games on the market. A masterpiece. It's constantly engaging, fun as hell, a bold step forward for the series, and utterly stunning to look at. If I think you should buy. I estimate that to do a pretty thorough job, this game is going to take about 20 hours, as in collecting everything, which is $2 Australian an hour at launch for a game with very little downtime. We're not talking losing 10 hours to cleaning out bandit camps and climbing towers. Are you still here? Why are you still here? Go and buy it already. Unless you are very, very worried about the performance. This is the only reason not to buy the game, but keep an eye on it because it will probably be fixed pretty soon. And in the meantime, there's a bell down there if you want more reviews and game design videos. And here's a playlist of my other reviews. Give them a bell. This is the end of the video, so here is a picture of a dog.